Hi, how's it going? Hopefully you're in good situation. Today I want to present about the draft law on the elimination of sexual violence, which is widely discussed about the ratification. So first of all, my name is Intan Rachellia. I am from Foresti Functional High School of Pekanbaru. Okay, before we get to the point, I would like to ask you, do you know the difference between the sexual harassment and sexual violence? So I think from the name, we also know that it's clearly different, right? So, sexual violence. Sexual violence is every demeaning, insulting, attacking, and or other action against the body related for sex drives, one's sexual desire and or reproductive function by force against someone's will and or other action that cause a person to be unable to give a free state. Due to unique power relation, gender relation, and or other cause which result in or can result in suffering or suffering to physical, psychology, sexual, physical harm, economic, social, culture, and or political. The explanation from the sexual violence, I got it from the draft law of elimination, chapter 1, verse 1. Then sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is everything, action, behavior, gesture which has a sexual content unwanted, so cause anger, humiliation, shame, depression, uncomfortable, and not safe for others. So it's clearly different. Yes, sexual violence is linked to the core of this case and includes all the deviant acts, but sexual harassment is one of part from the sexual violence. Next, there are some news from the National Women's Commission state that in 2020 there has been a decrease in reports related to cases of violence against women by 31%. What a good news, huh? But that's not all the data because the pandemic caused unstable data collection, and many of victims are afraid to report to the authorities. This is the graphic of victims of violence that is data by the National Women's Commission. From this graphic, the diagrams show up and down because not all the victims dare to speak out. Why? Because they are afraid. In 2019, although the rate of the violence is very high, we have not interpreted that this is the number of this case that occurs in that year. Why do victims tend not to speak out or report to the authorities? In my opinion and analysis from related source, the victim is afraid because first, the disgusted response that people give when they complain about their problem. I'm not saying all Indonesian people was like that though, but it happens often. Then second, because there are still threats from the perpetrator and the victim culture continues blame. The culture blaming entirely is the culture of blaming is the notion that sexual violence occur not entirely the fault of the perpetrator, but also the fault of the victim, considered inviting the perpetrator to perform sexual acts that are not the victim's want. My question is it possible for women with a Muslim cause include inviting the perpetrators? An unreasonable response if the victim invited the perpetrator. The third is trauma victim. At that time, her or his mind must be wandering here and there looking for help, but they didn't dare and choose to keep their trauma. Why do I say his or her? Because there are also a man explain the sexual violence, sexual harassment, but much of the victims are women, or maybe the equivalent of the victims is male and female. Because there are many victims who are silent, so we cannot to get the data. We'll get to the point. So the draft law on the elimination of sexual violence, or in Indonesia we can say Rancangan Undang-Undang Penghapusan Kekerasan Seksual. In short, we can say RUU PKS. Then RUU PKS or TPKS is a draft law that regulates a policy that regulates criminal acts against perpetrator and rehabilitating victim of sexual harassment. And in Chapter 1, verse 2 states that the elimination of sexual violence is all efforts to prevent sexual violence occurs, dealing with protecting and remediating victims, then take action against perpetrator and try not to happen against sexual violence. According to Women National Commission, there are 15 forms of sexual violence from the 15 years monitoring, namely rape, forced pregnancy, sexual intimidation, includes threats or attempted rape, forced abortion, sexual harassment, forced contraception and sterilization, then sexual exploitation, sexual torture, tracking in women for purpose sexual, then inhuman punishment and sexual nuance, forced prostitution, practice of sexual nuance tradition that harm, discriminate, sexual slavery and sexual control, including through rules discriminatory and ground of morality. The last is forced marriage, including the forced hanging. Next, after the movement of the amendment RUU PKS to TPKS, or we can say it the tindak pidana kekerasan seksual, there was a lot of controversy in public, which is resulted in pros and cons. Much of the civil society disagree because the amendment wasn't considered to care about the other case, because there is a related chapter that's removed from the draft law and wasn't considered for paying attention to victim. Why until now there are no ratification of RUU PKS? So from the source that I got, why there's no ratification for this draft law? Because the main problem is civil society mostly read hoax without reading the original script. Well, here we come to know that the literacy culture of the Indonesian people is low, especially on the news. Like in 2019 ago, Indonesia was again disturbed by false information regarding the RUU PKS, which is still being discussed in DPR. This is the picture of the demonstration. So, the hoax news state that RUU PKS will legalize adultery, free sex, and abortion. The community is asked not to support the ratification of this law because its content will actually make women oppressed and there will be violence of moral norms. That was a hoax. Then another hoax is a mother can be punished for ordering her daughter to use Muslim dress. What a pity, right? Then Commissioner of Komnas Perempuan, or the National Commission for Women, Madam Mariana Amiruddin, also said the public must be smart in absorbing information, carefully seeing where the information comes from. So in the 2019, this draft law called the controversial draft law because of the confusing news and a lot of hoax for this draft law. After many controversy about this RUU PKS ever took up from the National Regulation Program or Prolegnas in 2020 because it is considered difficult and regulates further study. But in March 2021, this draft was re-entered the National Regulation of Program or Prolegnas. Then, Madam Mariana Ufa Ansor, the Commissioner of National Women's Commission, stated there are 6 superior elements from this RUU PKS. First is sexual violence prevention. The second is form of criminal acts of sexual violence. Third is criminal procedural law. 4th is victim protection and recovery. Then 5 is the role of the community and regional leaders. And 6 is monitoring if it has been approved. In my opinion, I disagree about the changes name from RUU PKS to TPKS or Tindak Pidana Kekerasan Seksual because I think there are 4 criminal acts considering criminal acts, namely KUHP, Law Number 23 of 2004, considering the elimination of domestic violence, then Law Number 35 of 2014, considering the protection children, then Law Number 21 of 2007, considering the eradicating of trafficking in person. From the 4 criminal acts, I think it doesn't cover concrete protection like KUHP or criminal code, which only regulates sexual violence in context that limited, namely rape, in the narrow sense. Then Law Number 35 of 2014 only applies if the victim is a child. Then the Law Number 23 of 2004 only applies to sexual violence within the household. And Law Number 21 of 2007 only applies to trafficking in person whose purpose is for sexual purpose. So that we need a solid legal wall that regulates all exciting sexual violence and provide protection for victims. If we say sexual violence crime, maybe it will focus on the punishment for the perpetrator without focus on the deletion. But that's just an argument, guys. Even if the name is changed without any reduction in the content from the previous one, or there is a revision that doesn't delete the meaning of the draft law, it doesn't matter for the ratification. But RUU PKS is not the only final solution to end the sexual violence. We should not only think of ways to elimination it, but there need to be preventive efforts upstream and downstreams. Then we must give some education for community in Indonesia about the sexual violence.